What a week we had last week. That week that the King had with the Queen in the United States. It was the most testing and toughest week he had since his coronation. You know, I looked at the film of him climbing the aircraft steps at the end of the visit to Bermuda, holding the handrail, and he looked very, very tired indeed. Hardly surprising, he'd be 78 in November. He's contending with cancer. And when he stood at the top and he gave a little wave to the island he first visited as a young Prince of Wales, you know, it was rather poignant. I don't know whether it'll be a farewell wave, but certainly there was a lot of emotion in it. And I think he could have got on that aircraft to come home feeling very, very satisfied. On these trips, there's always a debrief on the plane coming back, and I'm sure he and his advisors, his courtiers, the people who were with him, decided it was a triumph. And I think it was a triumph of soft diplomacy, but very much a personal triumph for him, because that centerpiece, that speech in Congress, during which members of Congress rose to their feet 11 times, standing ovations, was really quite something. And it was 98% Charles, I can assure you of that, with a couple of bits stuffed in about policy at the behest of the government, Sir Keir Starmer. But it was a marvellous delivery of a very well thought out speech, which I think covered all the bases and said what is important about the long alliance, the profitable alliance, the loyalty that has existed between our two countries. And I think it did more good than diplomacy in another form could ever have done.
It's really weird, Michael. I said I've got other stuff, but I will say this, and I said it last week. Sounds really disrespectful to say to a 70-year-old monarch. I thought he came of age. I thought he reinforced absolutely in people's minds what the monarchy can do with all the headlines and all the stuff and all of that that's gone on. I just thought that it showed to something that really mattered. And yeah, we can look at it in a sort of, you know, in a flippant way and go, he had Trump eating out of his hands. And of course, he wasn't barely on the plane when Trump wasn't slagging off Starmer. But beyond that and above that, I thought his humour, I thought the speeches, I just thought his general demeanour was nothing short of brilliant. And I think he deserves huge, huge credit. There is a story, Michael, which will make you laugh. Do you know what Saturday Night Live is in America?
Oh, yes, I do.
Have you seen this? This is a great show. This is very, very funny. One of the comedians, Colin Joyce, she's actually married to Scarlett Johansson, made a rather brutal gag about King Charles's visit, but it wasn't about King Charles. Have a watch. This is fantastic. Play the clip, please.
King Charles visited the U.S. to mark the 250th anniversary of American independence from Britain and to seek the release of a British hostage being held by an American terrorist. King Charles also presented President Trump with the original bell from a British submarine and said, "Should you ever need to get a hold of us, just give us a ring." Or Trump could just call the guy saved in his phone as Andrew Island.
Michael, the picture of Harry and Meghan as he said the King arrived in America to get the release of a British person being held by an American terrorist. That's actually quite amusing, isn't it, to be fair?
Well, the way that they laughed at it, they immediately got the joke. I mean, there seems to be no doubt about it. Speculating who wears the pants in that particular family. Of course, it's very apparent how much Prince Harry misses this country, misses his friends, misses the way of life here. I mean, California is wonderful, but it's more or less the same weather every day, the same people every day. And unless you're very deeply involved in the entertainment industry, it can be rather boring. Over here, there's diversity. He loves the sports, he loves the rugby, he loves everything, and his friends are here. And there's no doubt that he misses it. And he desperately wants, I think, a reconciliation with his father. How easy that's going to be, one would say never. But it's going to be very, very difficult. And with regard to a reconciliation with his brother, the Prince of Wales, I think that's an absolute no-no. But the jokes landed very well, and also whoever it was who found the bell from HMS Trent, a submarine that had service in the Pacific, was absolutely brilliant. HMS Trump, I mean, he was delighted by it. Trump was like a kid who had his Christmas present more than he ever expected. And the King delivered the joke extraordinarily well. Perhaps he's got a future on Saturday Night Live. You never know.
You might be right. Just Harry, this is quite a direct question. I had it with my old man, bless his, God rest his soul. He's going to leave her soon, isn't he?
Well, it's interesting. This is her second marriage, of course. In America, I'm not saying that they're like this, but they're serial monogamists, aren't they? They have several marriages and they move on and they change their lives. That's part of the American dream, the pursuit of happiness and so on and so forth. One hopes that the marriage endures. I mean, because you hate to see divorced people get damaged in that, and it's very, very difficult for the children. We don't know. That's the matter. I mean, it seems...
I think she will become more and more bitter as her star, there isn't even a star, wanes, and the chances to earn a living become harder and harder. And I agree with you, and I don't want to be disrespectful on a bank holiday, but I'm pretty sure I could describe why he got with her in the first place. I think the reality is probably dawning for him, though, having spewed what he did against his family. I'm cynical, Michael. I know that he wants a reconciliation with his father. Presumably he knows his father is ill. But I think he's also cynical enough, Harry, to know what you said is right. Not a chance with his brother or his brother's wife. Goose is cooked, and if his father is ill and doesn't last too much longer, he will be shut out forever. But she cannot, in all fairness, whether or not your wife or you're under the control of or whatever is telling you whatever, the truth of the matter is, if you diss your family, if you diss the very institution from which you are part of, and it's the only thing, by the way, Harry, that people are interested in you is because you are a prince, right? If you diss that, what have you got? That's what she's found out. We've gone from the Duchess of Sussex to somebody, and people laugh at me, who makes and markets jam, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Well, they're in a position where they have to keep going forward, rather like a shark. They have to keep going forward to sell themselves, to get more money. They've got a very, very expensive lifestyle, living in their mansion, 24-hour day security, 3 shifts of hefty men, all the electronics surveillance and so on. That is expensive. You have to, and what are they're selling? They're selling themselves. And as you say, what they're interested in, Prince Harry, is that he was a member of the royal family and remains a member of the royal family, although, as you so rightly say, in his books and in his television programs, he's been disobliging about almost every member of the royal family, including the king, the Queen. He said some bitter things about her, which I'm sure didn't go down very well with the king at all. It's the greatest pity, because he had that gift.
He did.
He had that gift of communicating, which he got from his mother. He was doing such great work in the Invictus Games. Let's give tribute to that. A brilliant concept. But when you think of him, when he used to be on the running track with Usain Bolt, and he tapped him on the shoulder and he ran, he was full of fun. You don't actually see that anymore. You don't
she's
see
drained
that
it out of him. She's drained it out of him. The boy's whipped. I mean, that's a fact. But listen, we could talk all day. I think he probably realises that he's messed up. I did a whole show on this on Thursday. Let's firstly talk about anti-Semitism. Your leader, Kemi Badenoch, has been quite vocal about this. It is disgusting. And I understand the Jewish community are sick of platitudes, Mel. It's time for action, is it not?
Yes, absolutely, and we haven't seen enough of it. We've got a rising tide of vile anti-Semitism in our country, and Kemi Badenoch has described this as a national emergency, and I think she's absolutely right. What we need is a very robust approach to this problem. So in terms of policing, for example, we need to put more resource into that. We need to, even in certain areas where really vile things can happen in Jewish communities, we need to have armed officers actually available in the area to act swiftly as and when required. We also need to make sure that justice is served swiftly when incidents do occur and people step over that line. And I think the third thing I would say is around the comments made by Jonathan Hall, the government's independent advisor on terrorism, who is suggesting a moratorium on these marches, which have become less and less about Palestinian issues and so on, and more about anti-Semitism and some of the language that's being used.
There is no doubt. There is no doubt.
They've been used.
I agree with you. There is no doubt that those marches spew hatred, and there is no doubt that we all want to live in a society where free speech is prevalent. But there comes a point where a line is crossed. Can I ask you to respond to Zach Polansky, the leader of the Green Party? He ignited a big row over the Golders Green terror attack. We'll know that after police officers responded to a knife attack on 2 Jewish men, the suspect has been charged. So we have to be careful legally, Mel. But this man says or believes that it's more important to attack whether it was proportionate force used by 2 brave policemen who were faced by a bloke with a knife who potentially could have had a device in his rucksack than deal with the issue. And this man's a Jew. This has caused absolute outrage. And does it not, with respect on a national level, speak entirely that this party has become, this is my opinion, a mop-up of all the people that followed Jeremy Corbyn and voted him? I think it's very frightening.
Yeah, what this speaks to, as I think you've hit the nail on the head, is the fact that the Green Party now is leaning into these issues in a very unhealthy and divisive way, and that is why Zach Polansky is very reticent to properly resile from the inappropriate remarks he made and forwarding of that email criticising the police at a time when, of course, they were in huge personal danger and dealing with somebody who was extremely dangerous. And, you know, people are going to start seeing the Greens more and more for what they are, and it's broader than the anti-Semitism that we're referring to here. It's also about, you know, their approach to the economy, which is absolutely mad fantasy economics, wanting to pull out of NATO, wanting to legalise crack cocaine, heroin, and so on. This is a party that is way away from where it was many years ago. Yep. As a kind of, you know, the vanguard of standing up on the environment. It's become something else, and we need to expose this.
Couldn't agree more. As the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, I'd love your response to the latest news. Starmer's landed in Armenia and made no secret of the fact. It's on the front of every newspaper. Britain told to pay £1 billion a year to EU after reset. With everything that's going on in this country, if people can't pay their bills, our Prime Minister wants to go against the will of the British people and spend money we haven't got, Mel. Where's he going to get it from?
Well, that's absolutely right. We don't want to be paying this money over to the European Union. And the reason why, one of the reasons why we don't want to be doing that is we cannot afford it, Jeremy. We can't afford it because this Labour Party and Chancellor have completely mismanaged the economy. You know, we're looking at unemployment at a 5-year high now. We've had very sluggish growth. We, in terms of inflation being high, we're an outlier compared to other countries. We've run up debt like there's no tomorrow, and we're in a very fragile position in a very dangerous and uncertain world, and that is down to the choices that this government has taken.
Just very quickly, do you believe that he will try and force through closer ties with Europe? Are you on the Conservative side concerned about that? Or is this rhetoric for a man who frankly would know that his days are numbered, Mel?
I think it's very difficult to judge, Jeremy, what the impetus is of impulses of the Prime Minister. I mean, he's desperately hanging on by his fingernails. We do know that there's a groundswell of support for this kind of move from Labour MPs and indeed Labour voters in the country. So he's probably being pushed to some degree by that. But look, we've got a Labour government here that's messed up the economy and is desperately flailing around for any possible avenue just to get some kind of relief from the kind of mess that they've created.
We've been talking about Zach Polansky. After police officers responded to that knife attack on 2 Jewish men last week, cue much anger, of course. He has been charged, so it's an ongoing legal case, so it's difficult. I don't want to talk about him. I want to talk about the fact that the Green Party leader is now concentrating on saying was proportionate force used by those 2 brave police officers. For me, I've been very honest. If somebody just said, if somebody's approaching you with a knife that has a backpack that could have a detonable device in, you'd do anything. And I've been very critical of the police, but I think it smacks so much of where we've got to in this country that we're not looking or talking about the actual act. We're talking about whether police did right or not, Jake.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable that amid sky-high anti-Semitism, unprecedented levels of Jew hatred all over the country, where Jews have been murdered in Manchester, arson attacks against their synagogues and ambulances, and now a stabbing. That the debate that Polanski seems to want to have is whether the police were right to disarm the knifeman by kicking him in the head. I mean, let's look at the facts. As I've heard from policemen testifying to this, that a taser only works for a few seconds. It doesn't put him out forever. So once you tase the guy, you've then got to get the knife out of his clamped hand. And he was, if you look at the video, clearly holding it to his chest, not willing to give it up. Now, if that taser, if the effects would have worn off, then he would have been lashing out with it. So the police obviously had a limited time to get it out of his hand. And I mean, why are we even talking about this? Yeah. This is a chap who attempted murder of 2 Jewish people because they were Jewish. And this is where the conversation has become deflected. It feels like there's some kind of vested interest of, let's not talk about the threats that Jews are facing, or any other. I mean, you know, I'm not saying Jews because they're Jews. I mean, if any racial minority was facing this level of hostility, there'd be marches up and down the country. We're not seeing it. Yes, there's a lot in the news and the politicians are talking about it, but where are the marches in defence of Jews up and down the country? I don't see it.
Do you, I mean, I had this conversation the other day with a high-ranking person at the Jewish deputies, and he just said to me, I don't recognise the country I'm now in. I don't recognise how I feel as a Jewish man who's lived here all of his life. 257,000 Jews live in this country, and I wanted to ask you this, because we were talking about it earlier. If we separate what some people believe, think Netanyahu, let's get away from that. Let's talk about the basic human point of, is there jealousy about the Jewish community? Jealous that after the horrors that happened to them, they became insular and made a success of their lives? Where does this hatred, pure hatred that we see so often, where does it come from, Jake?
Well, it's got extremely long roots, stretching back thousands of years, of course. Initially, it started with the idea that Jews killed Jesus, which was untrue, but that became the basis of anti-Semitism initially in the Middle Ages and so on. Then, during the Second World War, it became a racial thing. Jews were racially inferior and malevolent, you know, controlling the banks, controlling the media. I mean, Chancellor would be a fine thing, and so on and so forth. And these days, it's become a kind of political thing, that Jews are hated because they have their own country and their nation state. But I think that there's something else going on here as well, which is that in this day and age, in a country where you're not allowed to fly your flag, it's taboo to be patriotic, it's taboo to say, actually, we don't want foreigners coming over here illegally and committing crime. You're not even allowed to say that, or you'll be Islamophobic. Jewish people are a provocation because Jewish people know who they are proud of who they are, still have the old values that we used to have in this country in abundance, of family, of community, of pride, of being unafraid to fight for yourself and defend yourself and stand up for your own values. And we're, you know, our political elites are trying to tamp that down in our country. And I think that they look at Jews, they think, you know what, you're just not very fashionable at the moment. And so there's less of an impulse to defend them on top of centuries and centuries of anti-Semitism that at the moment is focusing on through the prism of hatred of Israel, or as I call it, Israelophobia.
In terms of, and we haven't got an awful lot of time, but I want to ask you this, as a Jewish person, how do people feel? What's it like living here? What's it like living amongst that fear and concern?
I think for a lot of, for Jewish people, certainly those living inside the Jewish community, you feel like you're living under witness protection a lot of the time. Because whenever you go to your school or go to your synagogue or a community centre or any event, there's always airport style levels of security protecting you. And the more attacks they are, rather than solving the root cause of the problem, which is a lot of Islamists in this country and a lot of far left people giving them cover, rather than addressing that, the Prime Minister simply wants to give more money to build higher walls, more people with machine guns and more security. So it's like living increasingly behind Fort Knox, like you're in prison when you haven't done anything wrong. It's like the prisoners are free to roam the streets and the people who are law-abiding are the ones who have to be protected. It's totally topsy-turvy.
How does it change, very briefly, how does it change in your mind?
It changes with a clampdown on anti-Semitism across the board. We need a dedicated police unit dedicated towards anti-Semitism, a dedicated CPS unit towards anti-Semitism. We need a counter-propaganda campaign from the government to say, no, Israel is not baby killers, Jews are not evil, rolled out across the media, across the arts. We need the depoliticization of our universities. We need to root out anti-Semitism in this way from the NHS, from the civil service, and even from the backbenches of Parliament, quite frankly. We need to stop the Muslim extremists from using our tolerances and our freedoms to overturn those tolerances and those freedoms. The Jews are first in the firing line, but actually they're coming for you and coming for me, coming for this country, and we've got to stop them before it's too late.
Listen, I'm really old-fashioned. I voted to... I'm going to be really honest, as I was yesterday. I voted to leave. This was my opinion, because I believe that Great Britain had a chance to go back into itself. I remember when we were the industrial leaders of the world. I remember what happened to Germany after the Second World War. They went into themselves and created huge success, and that was how I believe growth would come, by building things, making things, selling things, not under the control of people telling us how to build them and where to sell them. Patently, Brexit hasn't happened. Patently, we now have a government that actually would prefer the complete opposite, backed by figures. They say, oh, 70% of the country wants back. Yesterday, off he flew to Armenia, our Prime Minister, whilst his premiership in this country teeters on the edge. And we're told there could be, and I quote, a closer deal with Europe and it will cost us £1 billion. A&1, is that not going against the electorate's wishes? And B, and 2, isn't there a better way, if he can find £1 billion, to spend that damn money? Maybe in a tax rebate, or maybe dealing with the road issues, as Sir Ian Duncan-Smith said earlier, the length and breadth of this country.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, there was an absurd front page. It wasn't the Telegraph's fault, but on the one side it said we'd have to pay £1 billion to subordinate ourselves to EU law, and then on the other side that we couldn't afford a navy, and it's just a completely absurd contrast. You asked a few minutes ago what's wrong with politicians today. Well, I'm afraid the truth is what's wrong with them is they don't believe in anything apart from getting re-elected, and that's why they make so many crazy decisions. You know, over the years in particular, we've been told that we needed always to plan to fight with the Americans, and that's why we buy so very expensive equipment, always to be compatible with the Americans and to try and have the very latest cutting edge stuff. But of course we end up with too little of it, a point I've argued with admirals and generals over the years. This EU reset, so-called, it's just subordinating ourselves to their laws. And I bet you voted leave, as you say, because you care how our laws are made. The big question for your listeners, for us all, is do we care how our laws are made? If we're happy to live under law made by somebody else in an assembly and an executive that we cannot control and remove peacefully at the ballot box, what is the point having politics at all? You know, this is the problem. Politicians have stopped believing in anything. Well, I think your listeners do believe in things. I think they believe it does matter how our laws are made. It does matter that you get to choose the people who make them. And I think that means that at the next election, when people have seen clearly what Keir Starmer has done, which is make the UK a satellite state, I think they'll reject that very firmly.
I had Matthew Talbot on, the former Labour activist, thrown out the party, so he's got quite a balanced view, but he said that the minute we left the European Union, our GDP went down 4%, and that actually, however much the ideology of is you should stand on your own 2 feet, it was economic suicide. That was his basic theory yesterday. How do you answer that? We know there's been a fudge. We know it hasn't been carried through. And I gave my opinion of how I believed. But we aren't. We're in a terrible position. We've got no growth, no industry, nothing. It's a disaster, isn't it, right now?
Well, let's just step back and ask, what does the data actually show? And I like Matthew, but he and others have fallen into the trap of saying what they'd like to believe is true instead of what's actually in the data. So our trade has actually grown in real terms. Now, it's true our goods exports to the EU have fallen a little, but that might be because of the way they're counted. This often happens across a range of fields, but things like if tropical fruit is imported into the UK and then sent to the EU, under the new arrangements, that's not counted as a UK goods export. These little details matter, and there's loads of rebuttal out there. If you plot UK GDP against, say, France and Germany, you find, since the referendum, index the referendum, you find there is an outlier that's lost GDP, and it's Germany. the truth is, with energy prices going where they are, with COVID hitting us all as hard as we did, it's very difficult to disentangle the various factors. But what is for sure is the people who say we would have had 8% more GDP. They are in fantasy land, fairy tale land. We would have had to, if we'd stayed in the EU, leapfrog the other nations of Europe, even under the same regulatory regime. So what you say is true. We didn't deregulate enough like we should have done, and I regret that. But it is just not true when you look at the data to say that there's been a big hit to trade or GDP. Trade has grown, and our GDP growth is broadly consistent with the European comparable nations. And a lot of nonsense is talked about this, and it is not fair on your listeners to give them this nonsense.
You were a Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Do you see Starmer and this government undoing all your work?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm afraid it is a bit back to the deal over which I resigned from the government and overthrew. It's, you know, it's a deal that makes us a satellite state. It's Brexit in name only. It's subordination to EU law. Now, people might be yawning and fed up with hearing all this, but I'm afraid the fundamental question remains, are we going to make our own laws and go for growth in this country, or are we going to subordinate ourselves in a kind of state of pathetic resignation? Well, I know which I prefer. And unfortunately, the EU has over the years been built on a tissue of lies and deception and manipulation of language, and it's happening again. What's being said about the economy is not reflected in the data. The language being used about the reset isn't reflective of the reality that Keir Starmer just wants to subordinate us to their law without a say. It is a disgraceful thing to do. You know, the British people deserve the opportunity to vote and remove those in power, and that is not what Keir Starmer was putting in place. So, yeah, it does undo it. But, I mean, the good news is that I think that people have got the opportunity now to see it being done, and they'll have a general election coming up. And the idea that Kemi or Nigel Farage would be able to support this deal and let it roll on, that is for the birds. The big deal here, really, is that the next review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the EU after the next general election, if there is a government led by Farage or Badenoch, they are bound to reverse all of this. And the big danger then for the EU is we'll end up back at no deal, and it will be because people stupidly tried to subordinate the UK.
Mate, we were talking earlier about the brain drain. You started with Mr. Kyle. I'll finish with Mr. Baker. We miss, I think it would be fair to say we miss your intelligence, pal. You should get back into it. I mean that genuinely.
Well, that's very good of you, and I'm always honoured when people say that. But if people want me to be re-elected, you know, they need to tell me which constituency they live in and that they've got 20,000 friends. I mean, that's the trouble. You do actually have to get re-elected. And, you know, that is the problem. There is not a proportional representation system. If there was, at this point in my career, I might even get re-elected every year just as the Steve Baker party. I don't know, but...
We haven't rung to listen to you pontificate. We've rung and put you on because we're concerned. On social media, what happened in your car yesterday? What was going on?
I was being driven around Golders Green by a great friend of mine. I was there to meet the Jewish community and speak to people about their concerns and the such like. And as we were poodling down this road, some lunatic carelessly reversed out of a side road at some pace, wiped us out. Then he drove away from the scene recklessly, jumping red lights, driving on the wrong side of the road. And as we followed within the law as best we could, fortunately, he turned into a dead end. So when he turned round, we had the opportunity to photograph this man and put his face all over social media. If you know who he is, let me know, please.
So you are a victim of crime, because I thought you were that cool. Do you remember Starsky and Hutch? Do you remember when they were driven around and then when they wanted to catch somebody, just leant out the window and put, like, the flashing light on the roof? I thought as an ex-copper, Sweeney Todd style, if somebody did that, Bleksley would just lean out the window, the old thing had gone, and you'd bring them in, governor.
Yes, indeed. But, of course, I don't have a warrant card these days. I don't have a blue flashing light or any sirens. In fact, my friend and colleague very wisely did not block the dead end, because if he had, this man was driving like such a lunatic. He would undoubtedly have made a bad situation worse.
But bad? Was it political, or was it just a dreadful driver in your mind?
I think it was probably an appalling driver. People are contacting me to say they've done checks with the Insurance Bureau and perhaps it was an uninsured vehicle.
Ooh, see, it just follows you around. Now, interestingly, you were in Golders Green, and I'm desperate to speak to you about this. Obviously, those two police officers dealing with the guy who has been charged, and we have to be careful because it's an ongoing case. What I wanted to ask you about was the outrageous Zach Polanski's comments about disproportionate use, and just put it to you as an ex-copper. You've got a madman, or, you know, somebody who's, with respect, is not seen as balanced, running towards you with a knife, having stabbed two Jewish people who were merely going about their business with a rucksack that should or could be even more dangerous, right? How can that be disproportionate? And is Zach Polanski not just being political?
I'm not going to talk about that case in any way, shape or form, but what I will talk about is police use of force. It always has to be reasonable. That's what the Criminal Law Act said, Section 3 of the 1967 Act, the use of reasonable force. And other words have come into play in recent years, like necessary and proportionate. I think people who have a prominent position, like the idiotic Polanski, should quite frankly keep his trap shut, because he knows nothing about policing. I very much doubt he's ever been in a position of danger where he's had to restrain someone. And so, quite frankly, the ludicrous part of it all is he sits on the London Police and Crime Committee. And when you've got people like him spouting off about matters upon which he knows absolutely nothing, it's not helpful.
I don't want to become political either. I just think that you and I both have quite rightly at times criticised all sorts of police officers, the length and breadth of this country. But actually there were two people doing their job, being ostracised, and it's going to ask questions of why would you join the police? Why would you? You're going to, in that split second, you're going to be terrified. The other thing I want to ask you about, Kemi Badenoch overnight, Britain needs zero tolerance on crimes that make our lives misery. Is somebody finally going to talk about shoplifting and antisocial behaviour, please God?
Yeah, those matters that you and I have been talking about for a very, very long time. It's rather bizarre. Politicians seem to be coming round to our way of thinking. We had Starmer talking about the hate crime on these marches, and he actually saying that it looks like things need to be done. We've now got Kemi Badenoch absolutely hitting the nail on the head about shoplifting, vandalism, antisocial behaviour and the such like. The trouble is, talk's cheap, but policing's expensive. I hope that somebody can advise Miss Badenoch, because if she's ever in a position of power, she's going to have people by her side that know how to do policing, how to do it properly, how to regain the streets, how to regain public confidence, and how to lock up bad people. But we need more prison spaces, we need the courts functioning effectively, and we need more properly trained police officers.
And don't we need to change this idealistic madness that says that... I mean, I watched those pictures we're showing now. You regain the streets and people will go, it's not that bad. Well, it damn well is if you can walk into an off-licence and stand there where people just run in, climb over the counter, take what they want, and they're not tackled, they're not dealt with. This comes down to a complete lack of respect, I think, the length and breadth of this country. That comes from not enough policemen and women. As you quite right, there's a system that doesn't punish people. I mean, it drives me nuts, Pete. We seem to make excuses for the perpetrators of crime and don't care enough about the victims. I just think we send out a really weak message.
Of course we do. But the seeds of this weakness were sown back in 1997 with Blair and his political correctness campaign, which had much more sinister undertones to it. And here we are all those years later, unfortunately, reaping the benefits of it with the woke, fluffy liberalism that has polluted and ruined our public services and has led to this disorder on the streets, which, quite frankly, have been surrendered by a police service that sees itself more as a social service than a police force. This is what you get.
Couldn't agree more. I know you're a massive Meghan Markle fan. So we're going to have a little game today, because I was talking to Mr. Cole yesterday, and he was saying that she was very upset about not being invited to the Met Gala. She's also said to be facing fresh marriage turmoil scrutiny. As insiders told Rayner Online, her growing focus on money has caused huge friction with Prince Harry. I think he's going to leave her, and I'm going to give you a date before we finish speaking.
Go on.
No, tell me what you think before I give you the date.
I think he's got a very difficult chance to getting away because of the children, whether they're their own or whether they're not. It's very hard for him to do that. And secondly, he doesn't want to let his family know that they were right and he was wrong. He's determined not to let that go through. So we'll have to wait.
But I do agree with these sources that say that her obsession with cash, that's a surprise, I love this, is leaving him shaking with discontent. You're a lady, and I wouldn't respect you, actually, and I mean that. I love the bones of you. But I do believe that the reason he got with her in the first place was because she absolutely played him and used, let's put this politely to Angela Levin, used her womanly wiles to bring him into the fold. Would that be a good description?
Yes, I mean, let's just say it straight. She knew him after 2 days before she invited him to come to Africa and lie beneath the sky. And she wanted to have lots of sex with him.
Did she?
He's a guy, come on, he's a guy who likes women who have sex. And so that's where they went, under the sky.
Sorry, Angela Levin, I don't want you to be taken ill again. Are you telling me that she basically seduced him and he's whipped, and that she took him to Africa and seduced him under the stars?
Yes.
Wow. What about bugs in your pants? That's not good, is it?
Well, it was very obvious. She'd wanted to get a rich man. Oh. She thought he was worth far more than he has been. Millions didn't count. His huge amount of money.
Do you think that she literally was that cynical that she used her, basically bedded him to become the Duchess of Sussex, and then the reality was, and this is what, see, here's the bit I don't understand, and I can talk to you because it's like talking to my mum. You're not my mum, but you know what I mean,
no,
right?
What?
No, you know what I mean. So if she was that cynical, right, and used herself, right, wouldn't she have loved all the trappings of being a princess or a duchess or whatever? Why did she, or why was she then the force behind him walking away from something that you can see means bloody everything to her?
No, but you see, she was 6 in line. She couldn't bear it that she had to walk behind Catherine. She couldn't bear it. If you watched earlier on, when they were indoors and they had to walk, she would often go ahead and they would pull her back. She didn't feel it was right. And one day, Harry went to his mother and he said, you ought to have Catherine, you ought to have Meghan taking over, because she's the one who worked up herself. Catherine has not worked properly. She hasn't got the experience. So it should be Meghan. And this is obviously what Meghan wanted and told him to go and get it.
Do you think that she literally, do you think he sort of, the ginger one did what he was told in return for lots of sex under the stars? I'm joking.
Well, I don't know if there lots of sex, but he did it, but he did what he was told because he loved her. He was desperately in love with her. When I saw him at the palace, he was desperately in love with her.
Or not awe, I suppose. I mean, just infatuated would be a better word, right?
He thinks, and still does, that she's incredibly clever.
Is she?
Of course she's not. He thinks so. He thinks she's incredibly clever, and he can't understand why everybody else doesn't.
Well, because they see through her.
This is the most extraordinary thing to say, that he thinks she's so amazing and wonderful, and most people don't agree.
It's really interesting what you said as well, though, and I do take this, right? I do think he'll leave her. I get your point about kids. My old man, you knew my old man worked for the Queen Mother. He said to me within 5 years, how long have they been married?
6th or 7th. Getting
No, he said 10 years. That's right. He said within 5 to 10 years. That's what he said. He said he'll be back in England with his ginger tail between his legs, and she'll be in California probably with an A-list Hollywood star and 2 children from the British royal family. And I've always thought she's very manipulative. I've always thought... I mean, we had this thing overnight. Apparently she's lost the plot because she wasn't invited to the Met Gala. Did you see that?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. Well, nobody likes her. No one. People see the real Meghan. They see the phoniness. They see her greediness. And so...
I mean, if Anna Wintour, but more importantly, the Kardashians fall out with you, you can't have too much of a standing. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Kardashians and make millions, but if you are spurned by the Kardashians because they consider you below them, it's not looking great, is it?
Well, it was not necessarily that because they'd be below them, but they were very rude.
Yeah.
They went to a party and she didn't like the photography and she didn't like the photos that had been taken. You know, she's so important to herself.
Yeah.
Just leaves things alone. But they were quite friendly. But you have to do it their way. It's their party. You run the party how they want it. But she doesn't want to do that. She always has to be there.
Centre of attention.
In the middle. She has to be always the most important place. Now, this man, I've forgotten his name.
Harry.
But he were no. But he lent them to have his house and to
Tyler Perry.
Yeah, that's right. And they didn't give back any of the money that they borrowed from him. So, you know, he was her closest friend.
Yep.
Are you going to do that again? Certainly not.
2 questions to finish. I'm so glad I was sent a present. I'm going to say it's 2026. He will be back in England within 2 years, by the end of 2028, divorced with his tail between his legs, as the late Patrick Kyle said. What do you reckon?
I don't know. William might be king, might not be king. I don't know what might happen, actually.
Perhaps more importantly...
He might go and live in Africa and look after animals, which is what he wanted to do.
Well, according to some, he's living with one. Talking of which, let's finish as we started. Do you think they're still at it under the stars in Africa, Angela Levin?
That I don't know. That I won't know. But
how do you know that she seduced him under the stars in Africa? How do you get this information? This is extraordinary.
Because I was writing his biography and I heard all sorts of things and was told all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely true.
That she basically used herself sexually to secure herself a prince.
A lot of people do sort of try and make themselves very attractive to men. You must know that. But she did it...
I've never made myself attractive to men, Angela Levin. What are you trying to say?
Women. I
want to talk about something that happened, before we talk about the front page of The Sun, with Kemi Badenoch yesterday, or Badenoch. She was heckled by a pro-Gaza group in Essex, and to be fair... her response was pretty impressive. Have a watch, have a listen, peeps.
What about the Muslim people, the rise of attacks from the Muslim people, though?
Fantastic.
Are they not worth protecting?
Thank you. The people who've died and who've been killed were Jewish people in synagogues. Let's stop pretending that something else is happening.
But this isn't about...
No, it is. It very much is. It very much is. It very much is about Jewish people. And you can say all that you like, but this is how the 1930s started, with people pretending not to see what was happening in front of them. I am not blind. I can see. No. I'm telling people the truth, and they will always know that I stand behind Jewish people and I stand for them. I'm sorry, but I disagree with you. You just have to accept that. Yes, that's too bad. That's too bad. People know where I stand, and I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going. No. I am the right. I am the right. Yes, and I'm very proud of being on the right. I'm not pandering to the far right. What I am doing is supporting. No. What I'm doing is supporting Jewish people from the sort of ignorance people like you put out there, and I will never be intimidated by it.
Good to see, Ryan Saby. That's what we want more of, isn't it?
Yeah, we often see, politicians walking down the street and being sort of heckled by, whether it's protesters or sometimes reporters, and sometimes they just often ignore what the person is saying to them. But this, we've seen the Conservative Party leader attack it head on, and if she's confronted with criticism or a different point of view, she is willing to take it front on and explain, and also just explain her position. And there she was, also in that clip, she talks about how she's been to schools, how she's been to Jewish businesses where they've had, security protecting people in communities where people need protection. And I think it just speaks to, the wider argument of what's been happening, of what we saw last week and what we've seen for many months and years before that.
I believe that there are certain issues in this country that what I would call the professional agitators jump upon. We've had Just Stop Oil. We've had, I have to be careful, there's a local election, but Polanski, to me, in the Green Party, has hoovered up every communist, Marxist, left-wing weirdo that voted for Jeremy Corbyn. And, somebody said to me this morning, which I thought was really a salient point, have you heard the Green Party talk about environmental issues? No, they're talking about Gaza. They've obviously worked out that that's the thing. Anti-Semitism is rife. Kemi Badenoch fronting it on. And to me, I looked at that and I thought, that's refreshing. That's a politician. Because so many people, I think, would imagine, Ryan, that politicians don't say anything anymore unless a focus group says that they should, or a SPAD says they should or they shouldn't. And actually, you could see her keeping to the point but getting a little bit angry, and I thought that was quite refreshing, to be fair.
Yeah, in the amount of visits I've been on with politicians and done interviews, and they're very sort of closed off areas where they don't really integrate or actually speak to the public per se. But here we have Kemi Badenoch, who's not shying away from it, and she's taking the fight to the Greens. I think Kemi Badenoch also knows that she has to show some fire. She has got a big fight on her hands come the end of the week. And, Labour will be a big story, also with Reform and Greens doing well. But the Conservatives not doing very well will also be a big story.
I believe about Kemi Badenoch, who I've met and I've interviewed, right person at the wrong time. I think she's a good politician. I think the Tory party will not be forgiven for quite a while for the 14 years and how it ended. But I think there's enough about this woman, genuinely politically, but I just think, sadly for her, it's probably the wrong time. Front page of The Sun today, brilliant article. Just one more small boat and the arrivals will hit 200,000. We put that into context. The Sun, 200,000 people is the equivalent of the population of York, despite our Prime Minister saying 1 in, 1 out. Only 7,612 have been deported on the back of that. Would it be fair to say that the Sun newspaper understands, as we do here at Talk, that whatever the political fallout, whatever people's response, this is, for all sorts of reasons, the number one thing? Yes, people look at potholes and their roads, but because this issue is impacting on everything, it's what most people will talk about on the doorsteps, isn't it?
Yeah, this is up at the higher echelons of political debate, whether it's a local level, whether it's the high end Westminster. And I think that there have been big numbers over recent years when it comes to legal migration. Those numbers are now coming down. But I think it's just the imagery of illegal migration, people coming over small boats, and the kind of concept that why can't this be stopped? Why can't Britain come up with some kind of sort of enhanced deal with France to stop people even coming over in the first place? It doesn't seem to be. Why is it impossible that this is carrying on year after year
Absolutely
after year?
Right. Absolutely.
Back to 2018 when this started. Rishi Sunak, he paid that deal 3 years ago, £500 million. We've just started a new deal that kicks in a couple of months' time. Another £500 million. We're going to be giving the French £160 million if they, get the right results. It's on the sort of pay as you succeed type deal. We just seem to be handing over so much money.
Can I go back to what you just said? Yeah, I'm so with you, mate. That is genius. That is the shortest sentence. How is it impossible for the United Kingdom to not be able to deal with this bloody problem? No wonder I've heard every politician, leave the ECJ, the laws. I'm looking for somebody to say, this isn't fair on the British people, and I will not rest and I will not leave any stone unturned until I work out how I'm going to do this. And there will, Ryan, be people along the way who don't like it, who get upset. That pro-Gaza heckler for Kemi Badenoch, and you're not going to win with people like that. My wife's got a great phrase. She said the lovers will love and the haters will hate, and you've got to get on with your life. It's true.
Yeah, and I think in this case that you can apply that to this, and I think people are seeing, people, whether it's illegal, migration, detention centres, in their area potentially being built. We saw that reform policy over the weekend. I think it's just people are just seeing the fabric of their communities change, and I think that is something that obviously reform are tapping into, and it looks like they are going to reap the benefits of that come the end of the week.
I mean, my opinion on that, and I was very open with Sarah about that, is I'd feel if I was in a constituency that had voted for a Green MP and I was a diehard Conservative Labour supporter or reformer, I'd be hacked off. But for me, there's a bigger issue, Ryan, which is we should be saying to the whole of this country, whenever we have that, I said it earlier, we had the whole debate about houses. People go, yeah, but not in my constituency. I think we've all got to accept that if HMOs and hotels are going to be debunked, then we're going to have to build detention centres. It might be in the centre of towns or on outsides of towns in all sorts of constituencies that are controlled and regulated and aren't 4-star, and that will send a message. If we as a society want this problem to improve, then we're going to have to sort of join up and do that. But whether there's the will or not, I've no idea. In terms of The Sun as well, I'm quite interested. We threw something out this morning which was, I'm not interested in broadcasting, I have to be careful. Do you pick up from your readers an apathy to vote on Thursday, or do you feel that they understand it's important that they tick that box, whatever their political persuasion?
Yeah, I think probably more so than ever they feel that it's important, but I think overall a turnout in local elections is always particularly low, maybe 30, 35, 40% or so. But I think it's, issues that are affecting them locally, whether it's bins, whether it's potholes, but also they see, the bigger picture, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's, immigration, whether it's the health service. So I think some of those bigger issues sometimes just feed into that. So I think, and also it's a free hit when it comes to the government. They'll see it as a free hit, as they're not going to get elected out, but the voters will see it as a free hit. It's not a general election, and they can send a message to the government of the day to tell them exactly what they really think nearly 2 years on into coming to power.
I'm not surprised. I'd want to start this morning by telling you a story. I went to my son's final speech day. He left at 16. It was a school. Actually, do you know what? I think I'm going to tell you what it is. Lord Wandsworth College in Fleet. Good school. I thought a good school. And we all were sort of pushed last summer into this tent. There seemed to be about 500 or 600 of us, parents and whatever. And some bloke from the BBC, whose name I can't remember, for some unknown reason, he does a sort of political show, but he also does cricket. He's got a bald head and hair, lots of hair. Anyway, he stood up. He was the guest speaker being paid by the school and basically said, look, what your parents won't tell you is that Brexit was a disgrace, immigration should be allowed, leaving this, doing that. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is so fundamentally wrong. And walking out of that tent, Adrian, and being accosted by, I think, the deputy headmaster. Did you enjoy that, Mr. Cullen? I said, no, it's an absolute bloody disgrace. It's one-sided. It's fundamentally wrong to do that in an educational environment. And if I wasn't taking him out because he's going to another college, I think I would leave in disgrace for the way that you've done this. And I think this example yesterday, this isn't political for me. This isn't about the Labour Party. This is absolutely disgraceful to do in a school environment, isn't it?
Well, there are a number of dimensions to this. First of all, let me say that when politicians visit schools, it's a good thing. It's a good thing for political engagement. It's a good thing for democratic education. It engenders interest in the whole subject of current affairs. But when somebody senior, like a former Deputy Prime Minister, visits, you would normally have a whole year group attend, or at least a class, a form group. This seems to have been about 8 or 10 year 10 boys, they look to me, year 10 boys, who have been chosen for some reason to sit in front of Angela Rayner to be lectured at. And that moves towards campaigning. The law's very clear here. And I'll give you the chapter and verse if you like. It is Part 5, Chapter 4, Sections 406 and 407 of that Act, deal with political indoctrination. I will leave others to comment on whether what she said was true or not. That's not what I'm here to discuss. What she does with one year 10 boy is crush him. Now, a clever politician would have taken this boy's comment about his support for Nigel Farage and engaged him and said, well, why do you think that?
Yeah.
And then possibly opened it up to a wider discussion with his peers. But she talks about it being very dangerous and terrible, and if this were the policy, my son would have died. How do you think that boy felt? Why did she do that to this nascent political interest that the boy had? She crushed him. Now, the school has a problem from the law's point of view, because they are supposed to, the governing bodies and the head teacher are supposed to forbid party political activity. And this was a blatant breach of the law. This was party political activity during this febrile atmosphere we have on the run-up to the elections tomorrow. And the school, the head teacher, should have forbidden this. They have broken the law. If Angela Rayner didn't have the parental consent of all of these boys to use them in her campaign video, she's also broken the law. It was appalling.
It absolutely true, and you know, I actually wasn't saying my piece from a particular political stance. I agree with you. If you're going to instigate debate amongst the younger generation to try and enthuse, as you said, or generate a degree of debate at a very important time in our country's history, you have to give both sides. The point that I was making about that story at Speech Day for my kids' school last year was it was one way, it was overtly political. There are more than one side to every argument, and you're damn right, politically it was wrong, but also legally. Of course you can't use the face of a boy on social media without asking the permission, and I suspect that hasn't been the case. On a wider scale, which I'm not asking you to get involved in, that smacks of appalling judgment, which is pretty bloody interesting, because right now this woman is positioning herself to maybe or maybe not throw some sort of leadership challenge to Keir Starmer on her own or with others after those election results tomorrow. You were an advisor to Michael Gove on education. Can I ask you a wider question about education, which sort of is reliant on what you saw yesterday? I mean, we've heard stories over the last few months about, you know, the way schools are. One of the guys that works on the show this morning told me that his niece, who's 8, was in a lesson the other day and they talked about papers, and she said, my dad reads the Daily Telegraph, and the teacher went, that's a far right rag, blah, blah. Do you think that ideology has seeped into our education massively? Adrian?
Well, it hasn't seeped in. It has crept in and occupied the space, particularly across the humanities and arts subjects. You'd be very hard pressed to find, even at a university level now, anybody on the political right who's teaching in the humanities or social sciences faculties. It's been well and truly occupied. I've always made the point that looking at diversity, we've become obsessed with the skin-deep diversities and sexuality and so on, but political diversity and philosophical diversity have been set aside. It's much more important that educators expose children to political and philosophical diversity than be taught by someone who is gay or disabled. It's far more important, because we're talking about minds, we're talking about ideas and the formation of life views and world views. That's why it's important, Jeremy.
Labour plot to get Burnham a seat as Labour in waiting, but you write, Keir still doesn't get it. He blames everyone but himself and will fight to the death to stay. Couldn't agree more, mate. See that speech on anti-Semitism? It's like a robot.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's two things. I mean, in relation to the article, that's the latest sort of idea that my understanding is that some cabinet ministers are floating, which is next week it's almost certain Andy Burnham is going to announce he does have a path back to Westminster. He has identified a seat. And at that point, a number of Labour ministers are going to say to Keir Starmer, look, if you want to buy yourself a little bit more time, if you want to take the heat out of all this, if you want to avoid a civil war, then just, for goodness sake, just don't block Andy Burnham. Just give him the chance. Give him the chance to put himself in front of the voters. Give him the chance to run. You never know what might happen in a by-election. He might lose.
Well, I was going to jump in. If I was advising Starmer, I'm with you, Dan. I'd say absolutely let Burnham run, because I don't think any Labour candidate's going to win any seat. Sorry, I genuinely believe that.
That's the thing. That's the issue. And the idea is, you know, in a sense, call Andy Burnham's bluff.
Yeah.
That's one of the strategies. But as I say in my commentary, my understanding is Keir Starmer has decided over his dead body is Andy Burnham getting back into Westminster. And I think in those circumstances it will therefore be over his dead body, because I think if Keir Starmer, in the wake of the results we're likely to see on Friday morning, on Saturday, in the wake of those results, if he tries to block Andy Burnham again, as he did obviously in advance of the Gorton and Denton by-election with his disastrous consequences, then Keir Starmer won't be giving his party any choice. At that point, they'll have no option but to move against him.
Couldn't agree more. It's a fascinating article. I want to ask you quickly as well, my friend. Rayner in the school yesterday posted on X, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you seen the video? Child who's you know, says, I actually think Farage would do a good job. Doesn't matter about your politics on this. She puts it out on X, shows his face. I mean, everybody's gone absolutely mad, apart from the lies that she told about the NHS. But let's forget, this isn't about promoting Farage. This is about a woman who wants to be the next Prime Minister, or pretends to be the next leader of the Labour Party, going into school and as Adrian Hilton just said, essentially breaking the law. You can't put his face on the thingy. You can't go into school and hold a party political broadcast. Not a great look, is it? Has she thrown herself under the bus, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, I think it's being reported in other papers today. I think the Financial Times that Angela Rayner's leadership hopes are fading.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. I think she's, for a variety of reasons, shown very poor judgment over the last couple of weeks at the crucial moment. There's absolutely no doubt she was gearing up to go either Friday or at the start over the weekend or at the start of next week. Her campaign, she was ready to push the button. We reported this. She was personally phoning MPs saying it's now or never in terms of moving against Starmer. And I think I think a lot of Labour MPs, if not Labour activists, but certainly Labour MPs, have kind of looked into the abyss, if you like, and have suddenly for the first time thought, right, what would actually happen if Angela Rayner became Prime Minister? And there's no doubt she's popular amongst her colleagues, she's popular amongst her activists. As I wrote myself a couple of days ago, you know, she does have a way of communicating which is different. She did prove in certain areas to be an effective minister. She has something to offer her party in the country moving forward, but it's not going to be as Prime Minister. Angela Rayner just is not suited to the nature of that role, and Labour MPs are starting to recognise that.
The other news, which is only broken, and I have, not because you're on, I have been complimenting your newspaper for days, because one of the things that I've been most concerned about is the danger that is Zach Polanski. Today on the front, we have to be careful, you know this, because of the local election, we can't name candidates. 30 Green candidates probed over anti-Semitism. 14 points his approval rating has dropped, and I don't know if you heard the breaking news in the last half an hour. Dan Green, leader Zach Polanski, has said he was wrong to claim he was a spokesperson for the British Red Cross. Dan, he said, I used the wrong word. I accept that. Led by the Mail, quite rightly, this man's unravelling, and so be it.
Yeah, he is. And as you say, the Mail and other papers have obviously done an excellent job in showing Zach Polanski for what he is. But again, I wrote this a couple of days ago, he has been exposed, but on Thursday it's not going to make any difference.
No.
Because on Thursday, the choice for millions of voters, particularly in sort of London, other metropolitan areas, is going to be, do you want Zach Polanski? Do you want to endorse Zach Polanski? Or do you want to endorse Keir Starmer? And presented with that choice, sadly, millions of voters are going to say, well, look, I haven't got any choice. I'm not going to endorse Keir Starmer. I'm not going to vote for a continuation of his shambolic leadership of the country. So I'm going to have to hold my nose and vote for Polanski. And this is one of the problems we've got with Keir Starmer staggering on in this way. He's opening the door. for people like Polanski. You know, we had this great, this great speech yesterday, which you referenced. You know, Keir Starmer, we're gonna fight the anti-Semites. The toxicity that is around the Greens and Polanski's party in relation to anti-Semitism and other issues, that is going to be allowed to seep into the body politic, and it's going to be allowed to seep in by Keir Starmer. It's Keir Starmer who literally opened the door to these guys. We were just talking about it. It's Keir Starmer that decided he was going to block Andy Burnham. He was going to stop Andy Burnham, the one person who had a chance of stopping the Greens in Gorton Denton, stopping the Green surge. Keir Starmer literally put his own personal political survival before the interests of his party and the interests of the country. And on Thursday, we are going to all reap the whirlwind because of that.
It's astonishing. I've only got a minute left, but it's astonishing, isn't it? It's only, I don't know if you ever think this, it's only been 2 years, pal. It's extortionate.
It's incredible.
I mean, you just can't even get it in your head, man. Every day about him. Less than 2 years, Dan.
No. And again, you know, we as we were saying, everyone is saying, no, even though the voters are going to deliver their verdict on Thursday, and everything we're being told is Keir Starmer's just going to ignore it and just carry on as if nothing's happened.
Absolutely extraordinary. You know, and parts of his party saying, don't turn up locally, by the way, you're too toxic.
Yeah, we don't want you on the doorstep with us. Yeah, absolutely.
Even his wife's moved allegedly out of town down. She didn't want him in. Nobody wants him, and he's still there. I thought it was quite interesting. Much was written yesterday about Meghan Markle. She was ripped apart in a skit on Saturday Night Live in America. She didn't make the Met Gala. We were talking with Angela Levin and, in fact, Michael Cole over the last couple of days about how allegedly Harry is up to his back teeth and is reaching the point of no return. Any opinion on that, Dickie?
Well, it's always looked a bit dodgy for quite a long time. Harry, in terms of Meghan, he is a husband, he is a father, but he's nothing else. He hasn't really achieved anything. Yes, he's got his Invictus Games. That doesn't happen very often. That's every 2 years. He's in a very precarious position because he doesn't actually know what to do with himself. He hasn't got a role in life. His role finished when he left the army in 2016, his biggest mistake that he ever made, and a mistake that he would probably regret, because he could have done great things in the army. He could have moved on to higher positions, but he chose to leave for his own reasons, and he eventually got married to somebody who's really pulled him right down into nothing.
Literally, I couldn't agree more. And I was jokingly saying that I reckon you won't answer this, but there you go. You're too professional. I reckon he'll be back in the UK with his ginger tail between his legs within 2 years. I reckon this marriage is in the toilet. What do you reckon?
I don't think you're too far off the mark.
Ooh, there you go. Great news as well about Iron Kate. Sorry, I don't care if people don't like it. I think this woman's astonishing. I think what she's been through, I think what she brings to the royal family. Despite that cancer diagnosis, a great mum. She's going to return. She's going to do her first overseas trip since the illness on her own to Italy. Is she not? When you look at what Charles and Camilla achieved last week with their soft diplomacy, I have great confidence going forward in William and Kate. I think Kate's astonishing, Dickie.
She is astonishing, and the fact that she is going to Italy next week for Royal Foundation Early Learning to Reggio Emilia, which is in northern Italy, who are world-renowned for the way they are promoting early learning in children. Italy have got a strange system. The central government tend to leave the whole issue of children to families. And as we know, Italians are very family oriented. But here you've got an organization that is really out to develop the potential of children. And Catherine is going. She's got a lot of knowledge. She can no doubt learn a lot from the Italian approach. And it's good news that after her last trip abroad, proper trip abroad, was with William in 2022 for the Earthshot prize giving, that she's now back on the road, and hopefully this visit to Italy will be a forerunner to her accompanying William, who is alleged to be going to the United States for the World Cup.
Interesting to me, isn't it? If you bring in Charlie, you get embarrassed about the United Kingdom, and as you said in the opening of we should fight. Italian families are central to the education of their young kids. our government spends £1.3 million trying to work out whether there are racist toddlers in kindergarten. The whole thing's nuts. Dickie, just as an overview, after last week, you and I both royalists, Charlie as well, it was a good week for the monarchy, wasn't it?
It was an extremely good week for the monarchy. Charles hit the button right dead centre. He couldn't have done it better if he had actually tried. He's a master of soft diplomacy. He's a master at delivering the right messages. He did that to the joint session of Congress, where he was critical in a nice sort of way, that he wasn't actually firing 20-pounders at the president, but he did talk about checks and balances. He did talk about NATO. He did talk about the Royal Navy. He did talk about Magna Carta being the backbone to not just English law, British law, but American law as well. So he hit all the right buttons. And then I loved his White House speech, where he pulled the president up in saying, you did say that had America not gone into Europe, we'd all be speaking German. He reminded the president that had Britain not gone into the United States, they'd all be speaking French. So there's a bit of tit for tat. And then the icing on the cake really was the president's presentation of the ship's bell, submarine's bell, HMS Trump, to Trump. He would have loved that.
The impact on the global economy is felt in many ways already with that war. It's actually used by this government as an excuse for everything that's wrong, which is rubbish. But there's no doubt overnight we heard that 13,000 flights because of fuel, lacking of fuel, are to be cut in just 1 month. Airlines take axe to May schedules over fears jet fuel may hit critically low points. And the boss of Ryanair says airports should ban the early morning flight pint, pre-flight pint. I had 3 this morning, that's why I'm drunk. I haven't had this man on for ages. Whenever we used to have him on drive time, I'd wonder where he was. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's greatest travel correspondent. Where's he going to be? Oh, God, Calder, where are you, son? What's going on? Where are you?
Yeah. Good morning, Jeremy. Good morning, everybody. I'm at beautiful Paddington Station in West London. The Heathrow Express is just behind me, and that is taking thousands of passengers to the UK's busiest airport to fly off. But if you have a look at the front page of The Sun this morning, you would imagine
Come
that your
cry
half-term...
with me.
Yes, exactly. And it's got a picture of somebody in tears at an airport due to flight cancellations. And I am really, really concerned about this, Jeremy. That's very, very good there, because it is absolutely wide of the mark. And people are going to be listening to you and reading The Sun and thinking, oh, my goodness, my holiday is in peril. But I tell you what, it isn't. It certainly isn't for half term. The airlines have got plenty of fuel, and furthermore, normal holidays will be going ahead. There is a lack of visibility beyond the end of June, and a lot of people will be thinking, well,
so it would be
fair
to say then that the summer holiday issue is going to become an issue if we carry on going around in circles in the Middle East, mate. That would be fair to say, yes?
Well, no, I mean, because so let's have a look at the numbers here. 13,000 flights, 2 million seats. That sounds like a heck of a lot. Well, yes, except that it's 1.5% of all the global seats in May. Given that the average plane has, flies somewhere between 10 and 15% empty, there's plenty of room for everybody to get on the other flights. And crucially, most of these are airlines like Lufthansa of Germany, who've cancelled all kinds of little flights like Frankfurt to Bydgoszcz, which isn't actually going to affect your half-term holiday, unless you were lucky enough to be going to that fine
Bydgoszcz. Where's Bydgoszcz?
Bydgoszcz in Poland. Lovely city, well worth going to, but
you've been there,
probably not a huge half-term destination, of course. And Turkish Airlines, they've cancelled routes like Istanbul to Havana. That's not going to affect your holiday. And the big problem is that people are being, first of all, scared when they should be looking forward to their holiday. I certainly am. And also that they are hesitant about booking their holidays. And the only thing which is going to happen if you don't book holiday is, first of all, you won't have anything to look forward to. Second of all, it might be that the prices are simply going up. There's some great deals out there at the moment, and I would urge people to have a look, talk to your friendly travel agent, and see what you can organise for the summer if you haven't got anything yet.
I love you for all sorts of reasons because I think you're barking mad. So let's have this. Where does Simon go on holiday?
Well, how long have you got? 5 to 11, I'm going to France. Next week, I'm going to Armenia. Then in June, I'm off to beautiful Pyrenees, so that will be very nice. July, Mykonos, 55 quid, Luton to Mykonos in July. It's mad. And then beyond that, I can't remember. Anyway, everyone hates me by now because obviously I spend my entire life on holiday pretending to work.
I don't think they hate you because of that. They just hate. I'm joking. Now, listen, the other story this morning is the boss of Ryanair says that airports should ban the early morning pre-flight pint. I've never had an early morning pint, but you're right on your uppers this morning. I think you're a couple. Do you have a pint before you fly, Simon Calder?
No, but I absolutely know that lots of people do. I was at Gatwick a couple of weeks ago for yet another holiday in a well-known chain of pubs. I won't mention the name. And it was absolutely packed.
Was it?
And everybody having a great time. Now, what Michael O'Leary wants, he doesn't want any aeration. He doesn't want people getting on planes when they're drunk. That's quite right. He also would be quite happy to sell them a beer or two as they fly off to Alicante.
Listen, O'Leary, I know O'Leary. The only reason he wants to ban the pre-flight pint is because he doesn't want people buying it in the airport. He wants them to pay extortionate rates to buying on his bloody aircraft. That's the truth.
Well, I think there might be a seed of veracity in that. But the crucial thing is, now, you are probably, most of your lovely audience are too young to remember, but do you remember smoking on planes?
Yes, I was about to say to you, we were up the back having a Marlborough Gold and a gin and tonic, yes.
Exactly, and it was just absolutely normal till about 1990 when it started being cracked down upon.
Yes,
I mean, in
changed.
Concorde, which I flew on once as an air courier, they would come round and light your free cigar for you after dinner. Okay, and obviously the idea of smoking on planes these days is just completely mad.
Yeah.
I think, and let's hope that there is no incident which forces this to happen. I think it might be that we do get to the stage where alcohol is banned from aviation.
Right, talking of which, because I'm never giving up alcohol, I'm not going to tell you why. Calder, you're a legend. Angela Rayner's given up vaping. You've only got 10 seconds. What have you given up recently?
I have given up early breakfast because I want to be on top of my game and ready to talk to you as always.
I'll tell you two stories, which basically goes to show, I think, the rot in the heart of Whitehall when it comes to their work ethic, because there are a lot who are just coasting. The first is the other day I was chatting to a civil servant, and we've got recess in Parliament now, which basically means that not much is really going on, right? You know, you can't do much political. And I said to the civil servant, you take any time off over recess? And they laughed at me and said, no. Why would I take time off in recess? That's our quietest moment. I take time off when it's busy in Parliament and Whitehall, because that's when I can have a proper break, whereas recess is basically like a second break in itself, which I'm being paid for. No one takes time off in recess because actually it means that we don't have much going on anyway, so we can put our feet up and get paid for it. And that is that is a lot of the mentality. Last year, or maybe 2 years ago, I was asked to come into a certain government department to give a talk about sort of like dealing with the press and sort of what journalists do and how they can sort of like help with us. And I came into, I was told I was going to be addressing the entire press office and taking some questions from them. And I came in through the department, which was like a ghost ship, hardly anyone at their desks. And this was a Wednesday. I then got into the room where the press office was, and there were 4 people on there. And I thought, civil servant efficiency's done so well. There's only 4 people in this streamlined press office now. And then a big TV flickered into life. And there's about 50 people beaming in from home. And this, I think, just goes to show the problem. And, there's flexi working in the civil service now. So I think you're meant to do 3 out of 5 days a week. But it does strike me that it's really not it's not really cutting the mustard at the moment.
I'm sort of with you, and there's a great debate this morning, and this is absolutely flown, Jack, for obvious reasons. You know, you'll have people saying, look, I'm self-employed. We had a guy on saying, my wife's on flexi time. He said she has a 3-hour lunch break. I run my own business. It's completely different. I'm not giving you my name because she'd probably divorce me. But there is a massive difference between the private sector and the public sector in this argument. There is absolutely no doubt that if you work in a huge organisation like, for example, the civil service, where perhaps your targets... I mean, we had one woman on this morning from HMRC. She got told she was too efficient. She answered the phone too quickly. We had somebody else on this morning who got did you hear the bloke? He was going out with a girl a year ago. She worked at the Child Maintenance Service Centre, where 60% of them didn't answer phone calls because it gave them anxiety. For God's sake, I'm convinced that if you run your own business after this morning, I feel this really strongly, if you run your own business, you work in the private sector, I'm not saying that we don't have to have life balance and work balance, right? I can sit here and argue that I want to be in the office because of seeing people and banter and all that. I like being at home as well. But I'm not sure that we're as productive in the public sector as we have to be in the private sector. I could be wrong there. I could be wrong.
But that's because civil servants are virtually unsackable. But do you know who hates lazy civil servants more than almost anyone, including you and me? That is hard-working civil servants. You know, the people that give civil servants a bad name they just infuriate people that actually get on and do their jobs and work long hours. You know, the other day I was taking down into the Foreign Office crisis room where lots of the civil servants there are working to repatriate people from the Middle East because of the Iran war. They're people who are working, you know, sort of 12, 13-hour shifts, you know, putting in like a lot of effort. Those sort of people are the ones that just sort of hate the pen pushers who clock watch. You know, they sort of get in, 9 o'clock and at 4:45 they're out the door and the lights are off and the cleaners are coming in.
But you know what? I'm thinking back. I'm thinking back now to like my first couple of jobs. Just sitting here. That's the way I do this show. It's not prepared. You can obviously tell that it's that bad. Nobody would prepare this and actually put it out. I remember when flexi time came in, Christian, right? And this is the different mentality. I remember thinking, I can actually work extra hours under that to make more money, rather than I'll do it all at the beginning of the week and store it up and have Friday off. I wanted to do it all at the beginning of the week and Friday because it meant I was earning a bit more dosh. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not sure that mentality exists anymore.
Yeah, and I think there definitely is a sort of something for nothing culture that has really been has really been allowed to fester in society over the past few years or so. You know, we sort of talk about the benefits culture here, but also there are people who are actually in work, which clearly is a good thing, but not being as productive as they want. You know, in the public sector, especially as you mentioned, you just hear constant stories about people, you know, who aren't pulling their weight, or people who are resistant to change, and people who don't want to drive efficiencies. You know, especially this is taxpayers' money, right? So you'd think that every penny should be looked after with proper diligent care.
That's the point.
And you know, let the private sector make their own mistakes. But the problem is that in terms of the productivity side of things, the reason why the private sector often is more productive is because there is no safety net. You know, if you don't work hard, your company will go bust, or you might not get your bonus, or you might not get paid, or you might not get your commission.
And lo and behold, being in the environment, being in a company or an environment which you would find in the public sector, and you said it just then, the civil service are almost incapable of being fired. Imagine being called in like we were and being told that you were rubbish at your job. You were either being demoted or you were being fired, or that you were very good at your job and you were being promoted and given more money. That can't happen nowadays because presumably people will be traumatised if they're told they're not good at their jobs. I mean, I've experienced that in the last 10 years. Could you, when we were doing the old show in America, I remember saying distinctly that producer's not great, and they went, well, you can't say that because they'll sue us. But they're not good at their job. Yeah, but you can't do that, Jess, because that don't happen here. There'll be a court case and it'll go on. Well, how are we going to get people that do the job efficiently? It's not like that anymore. The world's gone mad, Jack. Absolutely mad. Before you go, just a couple of... in our different show today, because it can't possibly be the way it usually is, Blackheath in South London. There's been a huge debate this morning. Why do you think it's called Blackheath?
I genuinely have no idea. I mean,
because
there's a nice
the Black
down there.
Death, the Black Plague, and the people that died were buried there. That's what we were told growing up. Oh, no, not now. The younger generation have been on the phone this morning. Apparently that's an urban myth, and it's the colour of the soil.
Is that true?
I've no idea what's true anymore doing
Jeremy,
this show.
this is really not my expertise, I have to say. I don't know about Bleksley. I've only been there a couple of times to play cricket with Harry Cole. We went to the pub afterwards. It was very nice, but we didn't chat about soil or the Black Death.
If you spend the day with Harry Cole, you certainly wouldn't do anything other than drink. Cars on the road, less pollution, oh God, less distractions and exactly the same requirements for work. By the way, flexi is accrued by working beyond a normal day, and besides just having laptop is not enough. They can monitor to ensure work is being done. There are plenty of private businesses who have people working from home, says Martin, who's gone for a swim. I made that up. I'm sorry. I've lost it this morning. Literally crying. Listen, whether you believe you should work from home is great. Jez, I'll be honest, I don't agree. Today's show has actually been lovely, light-hearted, breezy and even informative, even when the facts are wrong. I've gone. I've literally gone. I've gone. You'll have to go. Come on, Jez. Enjoy the peace while it's here, says Deborah in Essex. Oh, God. Can... Apparently... Christian, you can't do this to me. Apparently, a mouse cheek has a fiver on Amazon. Peter Bleksley, good morning. I can't do this anymore. I can't.
Get a grip, Kyle. Get a grip.
Do you know what do you know what's taught me this morning, Pete? Honestly, can I say something? Can I just say something to you? Because you're a mate, right? We live in this broken, miserable, dark, sad, useless place right now. And the last 3 hours have been the funniest because people have just gone, we can't talk about politics today. Did you know about a mouse cheek like Peter Bleksley?
Yes, I'm fully aware of these devices that cheating, skiving, lazy, dreadfully raised people use to make out that they're working when they're actually not. Who raised these people? What kind of moral standards did they instill into them? It's absolutely appalling. But the trouble is, you see, in British society today, the D word has become a dirty word, and the D word is discipline.
Yeah.
Back in my day, if you were a young police officer and you phoned in sick, in all likelihood, the inspector would knock on your door to check that you weren't skiving. Oh, yes, home visits were a regular thing. They should be reintroduced so that those skiving civil servants who are down the swimming pool and the such like, or walking a dog when they should be working, they should get home visits, be exposed and be sacked.
It's really interesting, though, and it's just been hysterical this morning. I mean, it's sort of split, Pete, but I think there's a real argument that sort of has held its course throughout the morning, which is there's a massive... I mean, people can talk about anxiety and they can talk about COVID and they can talk about productivity and the cost of rent in London and big offices and all that. But there seems to be a massive disparity, my friend, between the public sector and the private sector. And despite what that last text said about, it's really important to point out that, everybody has targets and whatever... The fact of the matter is, if you're running your own business, if you're working for a private business, I suspect the pressure to succeed, the pressure to deliver is far, far greater than somebody... I mean, you won't have been awake, but somebody rang earlier and said that he was going out with a girl who worked for the child maintenance office, day care centre, call centre, and 60% of them don't answer the phones because they find it causes anxiety for crime. How did that ever happen?
It's absolutely pathetic. If they can't do their job, get rid of them. Let them go. That's the whole point.
Do you hear Jack Elsom say you can't sack civil servants, Pete? They can't be sacked. They're unsackable. How did that work as well?
Well, they must be. It's absolutely ludicrous. Either their union has got way too much power or the legislation is completely, utterly wrong. Either way, it needs looking at. I've worked from home a lot because, of course, I've written a number of books and plays, and I write those in my little office, the box bedroom at home. But I set myself a words target every day, 2,500 words. Yeah, and I will not come down for my tea until I've hit that target. All right, I get up to have a cup of coffee and have a break every hour or so, but I work and I work diligently when I'm writing. And that's because of the way I've been raised, because of what my mum instilled into me. These people, who has raised them? I ask that question once again. It's utterly shameful that they have no moral fibre, no proper work ethic, and basically they're cheats, they're fraudsters. If you're getting paid and you're not working, you're a fraudster.
There you go, you've got it. I just wanted to bring up something as well. You've talked about police and working from home. Have you seen that footage overnight? The French police finally came, and you look at his eyes have gone. French police finally last night slashed a migrant boat to stop about 30 people. You'll see the footage if you're watching right now on YouTube from heading to the UK. So about 5 officers with knives burst the boat, sort of 3 foot in water, and people had to run back to the shore. And that's the first time they seemingly have done that. Now, I'm quite cynical, Pete, because I'm sitting here thinking that's probably just a one-off for the television cameras. It's costing us 500 million quid a year. But perhaps the most shocking part of this story is that overnight we've heard that the French Human Rights Council watchdog is going to investigate those officers for being so awful as to deny those illegal migrants their human rights right to go to England illegally, if that isn't too much of a mouthful.
And in the last week, we've had 894 of those illegal migrants wash up on the shores of Britain, or actually been brought here after they've been taken from dinghies. I've got a plan. I've got a whole new revolutionary plan. We hear so much about human rights organisations, human rights lawyers, human rights cases in court. We're forever hearing about it. Well, with rights come responsibilities, in my view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set myself up as a human responsibilities lawyer. And I'm going to prosecute everybody who doesn't abide by their responsibilities.
But you can't do that. You haven't practiced law unless you have from home.
It's a new role, human responsibilities representative then. Who cares? Human responsibilities prosecutor. I don't care. People who drop litter, people who skive at home, people who are rude and inconsiderate on public transport by putting their feet on the seats or making loud telephone calls. All of that. You can have all the human rights you want as long as you understand your responsibilities, which is not to behave like an idiot, which is to work hard and diligently, to be polite, to be respectful to people, and to not break the law.
Just very quickly, pal, because, I agree with almost everything you say. Is there any way in your mind that those values, the things that we were brought up on, working hard, aspiration, responsibility, respect, decency, do you see that has gone forever, or can we as a country, not politically, morally ever get that back?
They haven't disappeared completely, of course, and albeit they are a silent majority, good people still outweigh bad people. But the balance, unfortunately, is swinging in the opposite direction. Of course, all of these wonderful things that made Britain the great world-leading nation that it used to be can be found again. But it starts in the schools, in the home, in the workplace. We need discipline, we need respect, we need manners, and we need consideration for your fellow human being.
We're delighted to be joined now by former senior military intelligence officer, well known on the station, and a great voice, Philip Ingram, MBE. A very good morning to you, sir.
Morning, JK, and I am working from home, and I did get up at sort of 6:45 to make sure I was ready for you this morning.
I feel like you're having to defend it. Did you know? Let me throw some other things at you. Did you know that we had a text earlier, Philip, from a man in Bradwell? I asked where Bradwell was. There are 5 bloody Bradwells in the United Kingdom.
Well, you learn something new every day. But when it comes to dishwashers, I do find it quite therapeutic cleaning out the fine filter in the dishwasher. There you go.
Oh, my God. I've heard it all now. Am I going to have to change tack to the Times Radio morning subject of dishwashers? Yeah, well, maybe. Listen, you're on to talk about the situation in the Middle East. We love your involvement. Thank you, Philip. I'm going to be really straight with you. I'm not a military expert. I've listened to people say that, Trump needed to do this because of the nuclear threat. I've heard other people say, come on, successive administrations have never dared take on the Iranians. The mad mullahs that we know have caused horrific death across the world with their support of terrorist proxies. But But actually, overnight, I'm reading that he is set to agree a deal that will lift US sanctions on Iran, free billions and unlock uranium enrichment in what can only be described, Philip, as an Obama-style peace proposal, which begs the question, what the hell have the last 68 days been about then?
Well, yes, exactly. Donald Trump is trying to get an off-ramp to get away from it. And what we're hearing, and we're not hearing, we'll not be privy to everything that's being discussed, but what we're hearing suggests that we're going to get back to the old Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, that Obama deal that you were talking about that Trump voided in 2018. But that's when that's with regard to nuclear enrichment. Iran at the moment has got over 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium sitting there. That's only can be used for weapons grade, because you only need uranium enriched to 3.67% for peaceful power production. And this is where they're negotiating at the moment.
It's interesting to me, though. I mean, the cynics overnight are saying that Donald Trump wants this to finish at all costs before the midterms. Did nobody... You're a military man. Did nobody sit him down and go, "Oi, Donald, listen, the Straits of Hormuz is going to mess you up. It's not possible"? Did nobody have that discussion, do you think?
Oh, these military commanders will have done. You just have to look at the number of military commanders that have retired or moved on at very short notice. So I'm sure those conversations did happen. But you have to remember that the military isn't an organization that does stuff by itself. Yeah. It is led by its politicians, and therefore Donald Trump made his own mind up. Now, when it comes to justifying this, at some stage America was going to have to do something about Iran, because in the 12 months before America and Israel attacked Iran, the Americans had been attacked by the Iranians directly or through their proxies 140 times. So just imagine you standing in a boxing ring and someone hitting you 140 times before you respond. I think most people would respond earlier. So, and Iran has been attacking us for over years. When I was in Iraq 2005, 2006, I lost 13 British personnel, 13 of my colleagues, down directly to weapons that had been supplied by Iran. So, they're not these nice people. They were going to get...
and I think there has... And I'm so with you, Philip, and I think that somehow, with all the confusion, that's probably the wrong word, but with people not really knowing what's going to happen, and Trump almost on a daily basis changing tack as this war has sort of unfolded, I'm at pains every day to say, let's not forget that those mad mullahs in Tehran have financed, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. This collection, this ideology of people have been, casting their terrorist net across the world for far too long. And so there's a part of me that thinks, I agree, Donald Trump, and you're the sort of man who finally would have the cojones to do something about it. But it's not... it's almost, if you like, played into the hands of the do-gooders and the naysayers who have said, oh, no, we must never do that. We might want to, but it would never work. It just seems, to me as an outsider, Philip, it's been rather badly thought out, to be honest.
Well, it's been badly communicated, and this is where Iran is very good at exploiting what's going on in the communications world, in the information sphere, because Iran has been behind a lot of the support for Palestine after Israel's attack on Gaza and dealing with the threat that's coming there. So we've lost the information environment, and that's the trouble. We're working with that, and it's very, very difficult to get it back again. The main driver, I think, for what's going on at the moment is Donald Trump going to China next week. Next Wednesday, he's in China. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has just been back from talks in China this week. And China gets about 40% of its oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz. So they're the ones that are being hit hardest by what's going on.
Are you surprised that Pakistan, I would love to ask you this actually, how come Pakistan finds itself as the sort of middle mediator between the United States of America and Iran?
It's an interesting one. I think they've just found themselves in a position where they've asserted themselves into this negotiating position, because they border with Iran, so they know Iran. They have got close relations with China. They've got close relations with Russia, and they're seen as not that close, so they can still deal with the United States. So they're an interesting interlocutor, but it's a sensible place. Anything that enables discussion is much better than anything that enables bombing.
And just, couldn't agree more, Philip. And just finally, where does this? A difficult question to ask, but I'm always going to ask it. Where does it end, my friend?
I don't think it will end. That's the trouble. If we leave Iran with a rump of what was there beforehand, it's just going to come back and bite us again at some stage in the future. So, I think we're in a less stable place than we were before America carried out its attack, but it was going to be unstable anyway.
You can't only give me 6 minutes with this man. This might well go over in the news. We're going to say a very good morning to the General Secretary for the FDA Union, Dave Penman. Dave, welcome to Talk Breakfast. How are you?
Good morning, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm very good. Is that the Civil Servants Union?
It is.
So you're at home then?
I am just now. I'm heading to Ireland later on, which is why I couldn't come into your show.
Oh, bless you. So it's been reported today in the Telegraph that civil servants are abusing flexi time to claim up to 50 days holiday a year. Staff, this in the Telegraph, as I said, are able to clock up the extra leave by declaring overtime, Dave, through a system that allows public servants to choose their start and finish times. Staff are also said to be gaming the system by leaving their laptops open at the end of the day whilst working from home, as well as counting their commuting time as work-based. Just as the General Secretary of the FDA Union, what's your response to that article this morning, Dave?
So, I mean, I don't know the instances that the article claims to report. I think in any organisation, you're going to get people who try and game the system. I started working 40 years ago when there was clocking in machines, and people would ask other people to clock in for them. You're always going to have people in big organisations, whether that's in the private or public sector, who kind of try and game the system. The flexi-time system that you're talking about works for employees, but also works for the taxpayer as well. It means that people can work extra hours when there are peak demands, so they don't get paid overtime. What they get is they get time off in lieu, and that's how the flexi-time system works. Operates across civil service, public sector, loads of private sector organisations.
Do you think that the civil service, do you think your union members are giving the British taxpayer value for money by working from home in large droves?
Absolutely. I mean, studies have shown, the departments have done this, evidence has been given to Parliament to show that there's no difference in productivity whether you're working from home or whether you are working in an office because you're working. Indeed, many people are working longer hours. That's what they tell us, because they're not commuting. So they're spending time, they're starting work earlier. They're working later in the evening because they don't have a long commute, they're unable to work. The nature of work is changing. A lot of what people do, not just in the public sector, but elsewhere, is based around a computer.
But it would be, I'm not disagreeing, and it's great to have you on, but it would be fair to say, if you look at studies, that there is more working from home amongst the public sector, where whatever you say, you're not running your own business, you're not as answerable to a productivity line as other people. I mean, there's those great stories, aren't there, about Jacob Rees-Mogg when he was in power, going to the civil service offices in Downing Street and just leaving notes going, I'll speak to you when you're in. Do you think it's... I know we live now in a different world, Dave, where it's all about, doing right by people. But you're honestly telling me across the board, and yes, you're right, some will slip through any system. You're telling me that productivity means that the civil service is doing as well as it should do by working from home.
Absolutely. If you look at the civil service now, many people working in the civil service will be part of a team that's based across the country. So there are people in Glasgow, in Darlington, in Manchester, all working together. And they can do that collaboratively because they work remotely, or even if they're in the office, they're working and talking to each other through systems like this. That's how a modern workplace operates. There are jobs in the civil service that cannot be done from home, just like there are jobs in the private sector that cannot be done from home. But this is not a public sector phenomenon. Look at HSBC in Canary Wharf, big tower that was built 20 years ago. They're selling that. They're moving back into the city. They're downsizing because they've got people working from home.
Do you think that working from home, and the way that it's grown would have taken place without the pandemic?
It was already happening both in the public and private sectors. I mean, part of the issue is the nature of work is changing. So there are things that people need to be together to do, right? And there are things that they don't. And things that you're doing, you're literally sitting at a computer, whether you're sitting in an office or whether you're sitting at home, you're basically doing the same thing with the same machine. And so that meant that work was changing. you talk about productivity, the government is saving £500 million by closing offices in central London and putting more people into the same space because people are working in a hybrid way. That's creating efficiencies for the taxpayers and savings for the taxpayer. Now,
I can't get into politics today for obvious reasons, but I'm sure that money will be wasted. Can I ask you a question? Two questions. One's slightly flippant. This is serious. What happens about insurance when you're working from home? Several people phoning this morning and saying, obviously, there's insurance of the workplace. What happens if you're working from home and you have an accident or something?
Yeah, people, I mean, organisations, big organisations have systems in place around providing people with equipment, checking issues like home insurance if you're working from home around that. So it's something that, there are millions of people in this country in the private and public sector who work either from the home all the time or on a hybrid basis. And so there are plenty of arrangements, and insurance companies have caught up with this for dealing with that. Just like some people use their car at times for work, and you have an insurance that covers you when you're doing a bit of work or delivering or moving between offices on behalf of your employer, you have to be covered by your car insurance. It's not a complicated thing, and lots of insurance companies have arrangements for dealing with that.
Do you think that working from home will just increase, or do you think that the reality of liaising with, meeting with, I don't know, all those reasons, do you think it will peter out, or do you think it is, in terms of cost and productivity that has been proven at several businesses, I get that, do you think that working from home will just continue?
I think it will continue, but it's changing. Work evolves all the time. So if you look at some of the arrangements now, what's happening is people are hot desking. So you're saving money, but reducing the number of desks. People are coming in, but they're not actually working with the people that they part of their team. They're randomly scattered around big offices. So people are coming out of the office going, this doesn't feel any different from being at home. So we have to think about how we organise work when people come in, building team days, anchor days. And I think lots of organisations that experiment with this and try to work out what makes sense. Lots of private sector companies are doing this. This would not make sense to them if it didn't help their bottom line. So it can be productive, it can be efficient, it can help both the taxpayer and private employers, but it needs thought, it needs management, it needs time. You need to have the right equipment, you need to have the right type of offices in the right locations. Work always evolves. When I started work, there wasn't a computer on my desk, right? That's how old I am, right? Think of the technology you use now. And so it will change, and it will change again.
And let's get serious before I get taken out of here in a white coat. Not that anybody will turn up on time because they're all on flexi hours. Let's say a very good morning to a serious lady. Yes. Samara Gill is Talk's breakfast presenter. She's going to give you an update now on the two Brits self-isolating at home after the rat-linked hantavirus and that ship. Good morning, Samara Gill.
Good morning. And don't worry, I'm only here from home for this hit, and then I'm actually going to Barclays.
Have you got... Sorry, I've had one of the... I don't think I've laughed this much since, honestly.
Yeah, I'm worried about you, JK.
Have you got a mouse jiggler?
Define mouse jiggler, and maybe I could tell you the answer.
Well, a mouse jiggler, I've learnt this morning, is that people who work from home and they put their mouse jiggler on and it says they're in a meeting and they're in the sea or the hot tub.
God, well, if I didn't show up to work, I wouldn't have any content to put out, and they very quickly find out that I'm not working.
Before you tell me about the rat-infested ship, as you haven't been here since 6, it's been a bizarre morning. Blackheath in South London. Why is it named Blackheath?
Please, pray tell.
Because we were brought up to be told that the Black Plague, which links into your story that caused so many people to die thousands of years ago, all the bodies were buried under. But the younger generation have told me this morning that's an urban myth. It's because the soil's dark.
Interesting. Wow, gosh, what a boring world it is without politics.
And do you... Yeah, no, it's not. It's actually really interesting. And do you have a dishwasher? Because I've been getting messages all morning that have been meant for Times Radio who have really... They've struck comedy gold. They're talking about dishwashers. Do you have a dishwasher?
I do. I barely use it. Usually I just use one-use... I don't do any wash. I don't think I've washed a dish in probably 5 years.
She's that rich, ladies and gentlemen. She throws cutlery and plates away. That's the truth. Queen Samara throws away cutlery. Right, on a serious note, we had an extraordinary moment this morning when we came in, because when you come to Talk Towers today and you look out of the 17th floor, you'll see the Thames in all its glory. And this bloody great ship overnight has arrived and docked, and we were all going, oh, my God, it's the hantavirus ship. Tell us more about the latest, sweetheart.
Well, yeah, no, I was thinking of actually doing my hit this morning from that ship, but I thought, gosh, it might rabble rouse. People might get really stressed out. Look, I mean, the reason this story is cutting through is because it really taps into the post-COVID sort of fear that people haven't shaken off. This fear of a random outbreak somewhere far away. It can suddenly land on our doorstep overnight, and it kind of has, because you've got this luxury expedition cruise ship. It's called the HV Honduras. It's carrying around 150 passengers, more than 20 countries. You've got British nationals tied up in there, and now 2 British passengers are self-isolating because they've got fears that they've been linked to the rat virus while on board. So as you mentioned earlier, you've got an ex-police officer. He's at the center of this. His name's Martin Anstey, and he's reportedly in stable condition after being airlifted to the Netherlands. His wife's condition, though, apparently has deteriorated before stabilizing again, which tells you why the authorities are taking this just so seriously. I do also just want to talk about what the rat virus actually is, because we keep throwing it around, and it's quite unsettling how quickly it spreads. So this isn't like catching a cold from someone coughing next to you or anything like that on the tube. This is linked to infected rodents, particularly rats or mice, and basically humans can catch it by inhaling microscopic particles from rodent urine, droppings, or saliva. So it's pretty rough, and these symptoms are really making doctors nervous. So if you've got fever, headache, fatigue, muscle pain, and nausea, which sounds like my usual condition on a Thursday morning, then you should actually go maybe to a doctor.
I think the point is, and I think it's, you know, we've laughed all morning and been serious all morning, and that's what life is. It's light and shade. People have died. I absolutely get this. There seems to be some theory that this emanated from 2. I don't know if you read this, professional bird watchers who found themselves in some sort of tip or refuse area searching for the remnants of birds, and there were rats there. But I think what's really important to point out, absolutely vigilance is important, but I wasn't on air during COVID, right? Because I just didn't. And I understand why people would now be going, oh my God, but there's also the other side of the coin, which is we need to stop panicking. We need to listen to the experts. You know, phrases coming out like self-isolation, you know, it's extremely rare. 3 people, yes, have died. But I think it's finding that balance between informing and terrifying. Do you know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. The only issue is that there is a lot of mistrust in the authorities. You know, you've got the WHO saying this is really serious, we're going to look into it. How the hell can we trust the WHO with some of the misinformation that they gave us during COVID? I really do think the only thing that stresses me out is not even so much the virus, but about the mishandling of these situations. I'm even getting my back up a little bit about these people being taken off the cruise ship. Why are we putting them into public hospitals around Europe?
But then not because I'm just up for an argument, but the other flip side is we were on air yesterday in the Canary Islands. They were heading to the Canary Islands, and the Premier there said no, and you understand why countries would say no, but what are you then doing? Signing 150 people's death warrants? You've got to try and do something in a controlled and germ-free way, and I guess that's what the authorities do. But it's really important for people to understand. It is frightening. Some of the headlines, front of the Sun, cruise Brits rat bug hell. They're shocking. You know, this is 2026. So much seems to go wrong, but it is being dealt with, and be vigilant. That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we should stress out. Don't cancel any engagements or any dinners or anything you've got planned. But
perhaps don't visit a refuge centre or landfill mine to look for remnants of dead birds. That's probably not a good idea.
Yes, maybe don't do that. And it's this sort of irresponsible behavior that puts us into these positions. Just think about the origins of COVID, which is still disputed. So, yeah, I mean, the uncomfortable truth here is, though, that I do feel horrible for those passengers. I have seen testimonies from them. They're looking absolutely horrified and scared because they are trapped on this almost ship that's got a shared ventilation with an infectious disease. You've got shared dining areas, you know, international passengers constantly moving in between countries. Cruise ships are a recipe for disaster in this sort of way, and maybe that's something that needs to be looked into. You know, I'm not a fan of regulation, but maybe more regulation around people, as you say, just coming in and out. We have no idea if those people have been, you know, at a rubbish tip looking at birds, basically.
Unbelievable.
And bringing this disease that's now killed people.
I can't do this. You'll know it's election day. We can't do anything political. So you being a political commentator is not a great fit. But it started with Blackheath. Now, you're a man of intelligence. Do you know why in the Greenwich area Blackheath is called Blackheath?
I do not immediately. I'm not a London native, so this is not the sort of thing that I would have been drilled into.
We were all brought up to believe that after the Black Plague and wherever it was, the bodies were buried on Blackheath, and that's why it was called. But the younger generation have gone nuts on this show this morning. They said, you're wrong, that's an urban myth. It's because the soil is darker. It started with that, and then it sort of gradually spread from that madness to a dishwashing text message that was meant for Times Radio. Not that I care about people's dishwashers, and has landed full square, Benedict Spence, on civil servants working from home. Because there's a piece in the Express, no, it's not, the Telegraph this morning, that says that civil servants are abusing flexi-time to claim up to 50 days holiday a year. They're declaring, they're lying, they're working from home, they're counting their commuting time as work. And this has opened up a whole debate about working from... And I've been inundated by text messages from people saying, oh, I've been reprimanded and fired for being too efficient.
Isn't that the plot? Isn't that literally the plot at Hot Fuzz, where the police officer gets sent to the Cotswolds or something because he's arrested too many criminals?
Yeah.
I think that's quite literally, once upon a time was considered a farce, but now actually it does appear to be increasingly the case. I mean, what I would say is, you know, obviously we can't sort of touch on different political parties or anything like that, but I do think it's a rather interesting reflection of the cultural direction of this country and also the material reality of this country. Increasingly, a job is not necessarily something you take pride in.
Yeah.
It is something that you clock into in order to sustain yourself. But on top of that, work, I think, just doesn't pay what it used to. So there's not the motivation to work particularly hard. I actually think, you know, that there is a certain irony that we're talking about civil servants, the direct employees of the government, because, you know, increasingly people talk about how the circumstances in this country mean that people simply are not motivated to work. And now here you have, if you like, proof. You've got sort of institutionalized people attempting to cut corners and not do the work. And I would suspect, if you were to ask them directly, it's because they'd say, well, what's the point?
But to me, that, you know, like, this is probably the most serious I've been all morning. That's absolutely what's wrong with this country. That is absolutely, you know, aspiration, self-worth, self-pride in what you do, not just chasing a better pay deal or promotion, but that's my bag, that's what I do, and I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. And wherever that takes me, I can look myself in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I did right. All of that's gone because we're soft, because people get stuff for not doing... I mean, to read messages from people saying, Jez, honestly, I was reprimanded... If this doesn't make you laugh, Benedict, you need to go and see somebody. A man said, I've been going out with this woman last year. She works at the Child Maintenance Service Centre somewhere in the middle of England. And when she got there and had her training, 60% of them don't answer the phone because it gives them anxiety for crying. I mean, how the hell does that happen? That's ludicrous.
That is a thing, isn't it? Yeah. That's a thing amongst a certain generation of people, not answering phones because they're anxious about it and they're not used to doing it.
Why are you working in a call centre then?
I know. I think that's a knock-on effect of everybody growing up of a certain generation just texting, never actually talking over the phone. But, you know, it's a two-edged thing, I think, actually, because as you say, there are an awful lot of people in this country, far too many people in this country, who do no work and it pays to not do any work at all. But on the other hand, there's also an awful lot of people in this country who do work, who work very hard and receive almost no reward for it because actually the things you work towards are now out of your grasp. So take people of my generation or Samara's generation, I think you had her on earlier. We've got people now who are working incredibly hard. And what was it you used to work hard for? To buy a house, get on the property ladder, to be able to have nice things for yourself. You know, go on holiday once or twice a year, that sort of thing. Not a huge amount, but you want it to be aspirational. Maybe get a better car every couple of years.
Yeah.
Do that now. You can't do it. You know, and this is again the conversations that I have with listeners of Talk quite often. Yes, you have young people who are feckless and doing no work, but you also have a lot of young people who work very hard and at the end of it have even less to show for it.
I don't disagree with you, right? An aspiration will remain or disappear depending on what you are aspiring to. But that's why, without getting deep, and we can't, that's why the benefits problem in this country that successive governments haven't dealt with is such an issue, because it sends a message not only to those don't work, it also says to those that you've just highlighted, you and Samara, that, you know, want to work hard, buy a house, have a better car, you're being screwed over, because we now live in a society where people get remunerated, for want of a better phrase, for not having that in them. But I mean, there's also a massive difference working from home. This has come out this morning between the private sector and the public sector. And I don't care what anybody says. We had a man on this morning. He said, I've changed my name. He was from Cheddar. He said, I work from home and so does my wife. I work from home because I'm self-employed. I don't have a lunch hour. I start at 6 and finish at 10. She works for home for the civil service and has a 3-hour lunch break and is done by 4. He said, I'm not naming her because she'll divorce me. But I do think there's a difference between the public and the private sector. Massively, pal. Massively.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, rules around what you can and can't get away with and what's expected do differ massively depending on what sector it is you work in. And again, I think that that's a perfect encapsulation in many ways of the direction that the country's going. On the one hand, you've got a great swathe of the population going, well, work is frankly for suckers, and why on earth would you do it? And the other half going, it's in me to want to work, to want to do better. But partly as a result of the people who don't want to do any work, whatever work I do will be capped quite hard, and it can only get me to a certain point. I mean, you know, we've also got to bear in mind, of course, the tax levels in this country are colossal for a huge number of people. Why are they colossal? Well, in part because they're going towards paying for the people who don't want to work in the first place. So it's a vicious circle. You've got two people effectively trapped. One, because they've never been told, actually, no, life is a bit tough and you have to work. And the other, because they're finding that life is a lot tougher than they were told it was going to be.
I couldn't agree anymore. And there's so much in that working from home thing. They tell me, you know, it was COVID and it's full of anxiety and I told the story about my brother-in-law. He works for a high-profile accountants. They worked out in terms of productivity and cost that it made no sense, actually, in their business to have an office in London anymore. And actually, they did as much from home. But I've always thought, mate, as I've said all morning, that the interaction with other people, getting up, getting out, moving forward. Maybe the answer is it takes a special person from work from home. I mean, you heard Peter Bleksley there say, you know, when he's writing, as he does, he goes to his room and he sets himself a target in his office, 2,500 words a day, and won't leave until that. I don't know, mate. Maybe it's just, but to me, I can't see how. I would imagine most people who work from home, this might be contentious, aren't thinking I'm going to be more productive. They might be thinking, I don't have to travel, I can have a longer lunch break and I'll do it without somebody standing over me. That would concern me, that's all I'm saying.
I think that working from home really does suit some people, because there are some people who will say, I will be more productive. Peter Bleksley is a very good example of that. That's a man who just doesn't stop working. There are other people who perhaps have other commitments as well, say children. So they might be thinking to themselves, you know, you were talking earlier about people who've got a certain amount of work that they have to do, and they're told, well, don't do any more because you'll make us all look bad. And there will be some people thinking, well, if I can get it all done in a shorter time frame, I'm not having to commute or sit at a desk, I can do that, and then I can do the ironing, and then I can do the dishes. But there are also a lot of people who would just be sat there thinking, I am going to get value out of my Netflix subscription by working at home. So, you know, it's a difficult one to approach, because there are clearly some people whose productivity is improved by this. But is that the majority? Where are those people? What sectors are they working in? It's a strangely personalized thing now, the workplace. And I think that it's beholden, actually, sometimes on employers to be able to work out where a person is better suited.
I agree with that.
With a team, or can they do it remotely?
Couldn't agree anymore.